2,000 years before Rome, a forgotten superhighway crossed the open ocean. This is the story of the monsoon winds, the ancient engine of a global economy. I want to show you how this predictable breath of the sky enabled a sophisticated trading network that connected continents, exchanging everything from black pepper to revolutionary ideas. By the end, you will see the ancient world as a profoundly interconnected place, challenging everything you thought you knew about early globalization. How could mariners without compasses schedule voyages across thousands of miles of open water? What clues lie hidden in ancient poetry and rat bones? The answers reveal a past where human ingenuity danced in perfect rhythm with nature's power. What does it mean for a civilization to truly harness the wind? Stand on that ancient shore and feel the air itself change. For weeks, a dry, constant breeze has blown from the inland deserts, carrying dust and heat. Then one day, a new scent arrives on the wind. It is the smell of distant rain, of a vast ocean stirring. The wind shifts not as a gust, but as a fundamental redirection of the world's breath. This is the monsoon arriving. It is not merely a storm or a season of rain. It is the planet's own rhythmic heartbeat made visible. Picture a colossal atmospheric engine, its pistons driven by something simple yet immense, the sun heating the land and sea at different rates. The great continental mass of Asia heats up rapidly under the summer sun, the air above it rising. To fill that void, a mighty river of air is drawn in from the cooler Indian Ocean to the southwest. For 6 months, this wind is relentless, saturated with the ocean's moisture, delivering life-giving rains to the coasts and interiors. Then, as winter approaches, the process flips. The land cools faster than the sea, and the wind river reverses its flow, now blowing dry, steady air from the Northeast Asian landmass back out over the water. This predictable annual reversal is the genius of the system. Ancient mariners did not see these winds as an obstacle to be conquered. They recognized them for what they were, a celestial conveyor belt, a scheduled sky highway. The very word monsoon comes from the Arabic mawsim, and before that the Greek mausim, meaning simply season. It was the ultimate schedule. This natural clockwork meant that a captain could plan a voyage of thousands of miles with a stunning degree of confidence. He knew that if he left a port on the west coast of India in, say, July, the southwest monsoon would fill his sails and push him steadily across the Arabian Sea toward the coast of Arabia or Africa. He would trade, wait for the seasonal shift, and then catch the returning northeast monsoon like a bus home, arriving back months later almost on schedule. This reliability transformed the impossible into the routine. It turned the open ocean from a terrifying barrier into a calculated corridor. To understand the first global economy, you must first understand this invisible, powerful, and utterly dependable engine of the sky. The monsoon was the timekeeper for an ancient world in motion. The first great pioneers of this sky highway left no written records of their voyages. Instead, their story is told in stones, seals, and the silent geometry of a dock. Walk through the ruins of Lothal, a port city of the Indus Valley civilization, flourishing over 4,000 years ago. Here, archaeologists uncovered something extraordinary, a massive, brick-lined basin connected by a channel to the nearby river. This was no simple mooring. It is considered one of the world's earliest known tidal dockyards, engineered with sluice gates to manage the ebb and flow of water, allowing ships to be loaded and repaired regardless of the tide. This is the work of a people who understood the sea intimately. The Harappans, as we call them, were master urban planners, famous for their grid-patterned cities and standardized weights and measures that spanned a vast region. But they were also almost certainly master mariners. While we lack a sunken Harappan ship as definitive proof, the clues are too compelling to ignore. Distinctive Harappan artifacts, like carved soapstone seals depicting mysterious animals and script, have been found in the ruins of Mesopotamian cities, hundreds of miles away across the Arabian Sea. How did they get there? The monsoon provides the most elegant answer. A Harappan trader, perhaps based in Lothal, would have waited for the predictable southwest winds of summer. His vessel, likely a sturdy, plank-built ship with a single square sail, would have caught that steady breath and sailed west, not blindly into the open ocean, but using it to speed a coastal journey. His route may have traced the coastline of modern-day Pakistan and Iran, a journey of weeks or months, eventually reaching the Persian Gulf. His cargo hold would have held treasures coveted in the distant cities of and Sumer, brilliantly etched carnelian beads, deep blue lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and perhaps bales of a revolutionary new fabric, cotton. In return, he would have brought back silver, oils, and woods. This was not random driftwood trade. It was a scheduled, sophisticated operation. They possessed the knowledge from astronomy to carpentry to make such journeys possible. They were not just trading goods, they were weaving the very first fragile threads of a transoceanic web. Their success set a powerful precedent, a hidden blueprint written not on papyrus, but in the very rhythm of the wind and the tides. And when their great cities eventually faded from history, the knowledge of the monsoon highway did not disappear with them. It was a secret too valuable to be lost. From the orderly docks of Lothal follow the trail of a single carnelian bead. It journeys west across the turquoise waters of the Arabian Sea, finally arriving at its destination, a city of baked brick temples that scrape the sky. In ancient Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, civilization was building upward. Here, kings and priests sought to touch the divine, constructing immense stepped pyramids called ziggurats and filling their temples with objects of power and beauty. But this fertile crescent, abundant in grain and clay, lacked almost everything else required for monumental prestige. They had no great forests for timber, no rich veins of precious metals, and no local sources of dazzling gemstones. Their wealth created an insatiable hunger, a powerful economic vacuum that pulled goods from the very edges of the known world. Cuneiform tablets pressed with wedge-shaped script speak of these far-off lands with reverence. They mention Magan, a source of strong copper and dark diorite stone, likely the Oman Peninsula, and they speak of a place even more distant and mysterious, Meluhha, a land of exotic woods, ivory, and brilliantly etched carnelian beads, a name many scholars link to the Indus Valley civilization. This was not casual trade, it was a strategic necessity. To satisfy the demands of temple and palace, merchants had to become explorers. The relatively sheltered waters of the Persian Gulf were one thing, but the real challenge lay beyond. Sailing down the coast of Arabia meant facing the open Arabian Sea, a vast and daunting expanse. This is where the monsoon transformed from a natural phenomenon into a commercial tool. A Mesopotamian or Dilmun trader, perhaps based in modern-day Bahrain, would plan his epic journey with a calendar. As the northeast monsoon began to blow in the late fall, sweeping down from the Asian continent, he would set sail from the Gulf, riding this dry, steady wind southward along the Arabian coast toward the rich ports of Magan, and if he was daring enough, toward the distant shores of Meluhha. He would trade his goods perhaps for that coveted carnelian or a load of fragrant teakwood, and then wait. He would wait for the world's breath to reverse. When the southwest monsoon began to blow in early summer, saturated with moisture from the Indian Ocean, he would raise his sail once more. This wind would now push him powerfully back north, filling his sails for the long voyage home. What was once a terrifying, year-long gamble with survival became, through this knowledge, a scheduled commercial enterprise. the monsoon did not just make the journey possible, it made it predictable. It turned high-risk exploration into repeatable business. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia, therefore, did not just rise from the mud of the river plains. They were built, in a very real sense, upon the dependable rhythm of distant winds and the courage of sailors who learned to read the sky's schedule. This Bronze Age demand was the relentless engine, the economic fuel that made mastering the monsoon routes not just an adventure, but an absolute necessity. But to see the true architects of this maritime network, we must look beyond the great river valleys. The real power brokers operated from a string of islands and rugged coastlines, places that turned geographic position into global influence. Picture the stark, copper-rich mountains of Oman, veins of greenish ore cutting through rust-colored rock. Now see the shallow, turquoise waters of the Persian Gulf, where pearl oysters clung to hidden banks. These were the heartlands of Magan and Dilmun, civilizations whose wealth was written in metal and mollusk. They were far more than simple way stations. Dilmun, centered on what is now Bahrain, became a legendary trading emporium, a neutral ground revered in Mesopotamian poetry. Think of it as the ancient world's premier free port, a bustling, cosmopolitan hub where merchants from up the Euphrates could safely meet traders from the distant Indus, exchanging goods under agreed-upon rules without the shadow of empire. Its prosperity was built on pearls, dates, and a genius for logistics. Magan, in contrast, was the industrial engine. Its fame rested entirely on a single, crucial resource, copper. In the Bronze Age, copper was not just a metal, it was the very substance of power and progress, alloyed with tin to create tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects. Magan's high-quality ore was so valued that Mesopotamian kings boasted of securing shipments from its mountains, but copper is extraordinarily heavy. Transporting tons of raw ingots from inland mines to distant cities presented a monumental challenge. This is where their mastery of the sea became their greatest asset. Their sailors, navigating in sturdy vessels built from reeds or imported wood, learned to read the monsoon's schedule with precision. They would load their ships during the cool season, and as the northeast monsoon began to blow, they would catch that steady wind, sailing up the Gulf to deliver their vital cargo to Mesopotamia. On the return journey, with their holds now filled with Mesopotamian barley, woolen textiles, and luxury goods, they would wait for the wind's reversal. The powerful southwest monsoon would then propel them home, completing an annual commercial cycle that fed the Bronze Age world. They were the essential middlemen, the indispensable link that turned raw material into refined civilization. Their success proves a profound point in this first global economy. The greatest power did not always reside with the largest army or the biggest city. Sometimes it belonged to those who knew the wind, mastered the waves, and understood how to connect everyone else. But what kind of ship could dare to ride this colossal breath of the sky? The monsoon was not a gentle breeze, it was a force of nature that could either carry you to fortune or dash you against unseen reefs. The vessel itself, therefore, was not just transport, it was a life-saving technology, a floating piece of ingenuity shaped by centuries of trial and error. We have no perfectly preserved wrecks from this earliest era, so we must piece together the shipwright's art from fragments, from ancient seals, from scattered mentions in poetry, and from traditions that have survived into the modern age. The earliest craft on these waters were likely humble yet ingenious, like the Mesopotamian quaffar, a circular basket boat made of reeds and coated with bitumen, perfect for the calm rivers and sheltered coasts of the Gulf. But the open Arabian Sea demanded something far more formidable. The solution emerged from the very resources the trade routes provided. Shipbuilders began constructing vessels from strong, resilient timber like teak, a wood that naturally resists rot and shipworms, which was traded down from the forests of India. Instead of nailing these planks together rigidly, They often used a technique that seems almost miraculous to us today. They stitched the hull. Imagine master craftsmen using awls to bore holes along the edges of thick wooden planks, then lashing them tightly together with cords made from coconut fiber, a material that swells when wet, creating a watertight seal. This created a hull with a deliberate, living flexibility. In the powerful swell of the monsoon sea, a rigid ship might be shaken apart, but a stitched vessel could flex and give, bending with the waves like a reed rather than breaking. It was a brilliant adaptation, a technology born from deep observation of the ocean's character. For propulsion, they likely used a single, large square sail woven from palm leaves or later cotton cloth, hung from a sturdy mast. This sail was their engine, designed to capture the monsoon's full power. But here is the critical nuance: these sailors were not merely passive passengers on the wind. Evidence suggests they understood how to sail across the wind, not just directly downwind. By adjusting the angle of their sail and using a steering oar, they could tack, sailing a zigzag course to reach destinations that were not directly downwind. This gave them a crucial degree of navigational control, turning the monsoon from a one-way street into a manageable network of routes. The ship, therefore, was more than wood and rope. It was a perfect synthesis of local materials, borrowed knowledge, and hard-won experience, a vessel born from the marriage of human creativity and the relentless demands of the open ocean. The true map for these voyages was not drawn on parchment, but etched across the dome of the night sky. A navigator stands on the deck of his stitched plank vessel, the monsoon swell lifting him rhythmically toward a universe ablaze with stars. On a moonless night, the Milky Way is a shimmering river of dust and light, so bright it casts a faint shadow on the water. This is his chart. Without a magnetic compass, which would not arrive in these waters for over 1,000 years, he relies on a deep, sacred science of observation passed from master to apprentice. By day, the sun is his guide, its arc across the heavens marking east and west, its height at noon hinting at his northward or southward progress. But it is the night that offers true certainty. In the northern sky, one star remains constant, an anchor in the turning heavens, the pole star. All other stars appear to wheel around this fixed point, giving him an unshakable reference for north. The rising and setting of specific constellations, like Orion or the Pleiades, act as a celestial calendar, telling him not just the direction, but the season, confirming the monsoon's schedule written in the wind itself. Yet his navigation extends far beyond the stars. He reads the ocean as a living text. The patterns of distant cloud formations might betray an unseen island over the horizon. The behavior of birds, especially the direction of flight at dusk, points toward the nearest land. He feels the rhythm of the ocean swells through the hull, learning to distinguish the deep, regular pulse of open water from the confused chop near a shoreline. He tastes the water, noting subtle changes in temperature and salinity, and observes its shifting colors from the deep indigo of the abyss to the greenish tint of a coastal current. This entire body of knowledge is called environmental navigation, a holistic art that treats the world itself as a vast, interconnected signpost. The genius of the monsoon system made this possible. Because the winds were so predictable, a captain often did not need to know his precise longitudinal position, a nearly impossible task at the time. Instead, he practiced what scholars call latitude sailing. He would sail north or south until he reached the known latitude of his destination, then simply turn east or west and ride the monsoon current straight there, knowing with confidence that the coast would eventually appear. The monsoon provided the schedule and the power, the stars provided the bearing, and the ocean itself whispered the rest of the directions. This was not primitive guesswork. It was a sophisticated, repeatable technology of the mind, turning the entire natural world into a reliable guide across the trackless sea. There is a scent more valuable than gold, a fragrance that defined empires and drew kings to their knees. Deep in the arid highlands of southern Arabia, in a land of stark beauty we call Yemen today, a unique tree produced tears of hardened resin. When burned, this resin released a complex, otherworldly aroma, a scent believed to purify the air and carry prayers directly to the heavens. This was frankincense, and alongside its companion myrrh, it became the ultimate luxury of the ancient world. For the civilizations of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and later Greece and Rome, these aromatics were not mere perfumes. They were essential for ritual, medicine, and the display of divine or royal power. The kingdoms that controlled the groves where these trees grew, most famously Saba, the land of the legendary Queen of Sheba, found themselves sitting atop a geological fortune. Their wealth was legendary, built on the slow, careful harvest of these fragrant tears and their transport north along a series of guarded trails through the desert, the famed Incense route. But their genius did not stop at the edge of the sand. To truly control the market, they looked to the sea. The monsoon winds offered a faster, more direct path to vast new consumers. On the rocky coast of southern Arabia, they developed ports like Kana, a bustling harbor where the scent of incense hung permanently in the salty air. Here, bundles of precious frankincense were loaded onto sturdy, deep-hulled ships. Instead of sending their treasure only on the long, expensive overland caravan route, the Sabian merchants and their successors, like the Himyarites, made a revolutionary decision. They would use the monsoon highway to sail it east. Catching the predictable summer winds, their vessels would leave Kana and sail across the Arabian Sea directly to the ports of western India. There, they traded incense not just for gold, but for something the Mediterranean world craved just as deeply, the black pepper of the Malabar coast, along with gems, pearls, and fine Indian cottons. Then they would wait for the wind's reversal. The winter monsoon would carry them back home, their holds now filled with eastern luxuries, but the journey did not end there. These Indian goods, now in Arabian hands, would then be shipped up the Red Sea, through a series of intermediary ports, eventually reaching the markets of Alexandria and Rome. This was a staggering commercial insight. By mastering both the land trails and the sea routes, the Sabians did more than just transport incense. They created a closed economic loop. They cut out countless middlemen, buying spices at the source in India and selling them at a monumental profit in the Mediterranean, all funded by the endless demand for their own sacred resin. Their maritime ambition, fueled by the incense trade, did not just use the existing monsoon network, it supercharged it. They poured their resinous wealth into building larger fleets, funding longer voyages, and establishing trading posts, effectively stitching the markets of India and the Mediterranean closer together than ever before. The scent of frankincense, therefore, did more than fill temples. It filled the sails of history, pulling the ancient world into a tighter and more prosperous embrace. The scent of spices and incense was not the only cargo carried on the monsoon winds. Listen closely, and you can hear the echoes of those ancient voyages in the very words we speak today. The exchange of goods across the Indian Ocean was always, inevitably, an exchange of language. When a Greek merchant first tasted that pungent, knobby root from the east, he did not invent a new name for it. He asked the Tamil trader what it was called. The answer, Inchiva, sailed back with him on the monsoon winds, becoming Zingiberis in ancient Greek, and eventually our word ginger. This is linguistic archaeology, a subtle but powerful form of evidence. These borrowed terms are like fossils, preserving the precise moment a new object, animal, or idea arrived in a culture. The journey of the word for peacock is another clue. While its Sanskrit form has deep roots in the subcontinent, its path westward into Persian and other languages traces the same routes that carried the brilliant feathers of the bird itself, prized as exotic luxuries in distant courts. Perhaps the most profound example is a humble staple, rice. The word's journey from its origins in South Asia through various ancient languages maps a story of agricultural exchange that likely moved along these maritime highways. Place names hold a similar power. When the Greek geographer Ptolemy wrote of Limerick, he was recording the Malabar coast of India. That name did not spring from Greek imagination. It was a transliteration of a local Tamil name, learned through generations of face-to-face trade. These are not the labels given by later colonizers or conquerors. They are phonetic snapshots of first contact, words overheard on a bustling dock and carefully written down. They prove that these were direct, sustained, and intimate relationships. The monsoon did not just move spices and silks. It carried the very sounds of one civilization into the vocabulary of another, weaving a hidden web of connection that still resonates in our dictionaries. Words and artifacts can tell powerful stories, but some of the most undeniable proof of this ancient network comes from silent stowaways. Archaeologists now look beyond temples and tablets to the smallest passengers on those monsoon-driven ships, the seeds, the insects, and the bones of animals that had no business being where we find them. This field, called bioarchaeology, turns the humble into the historic. Take the common chicken. For a long time, scholars believed chickens were introduced to Africa from Europe or the Middle East in more recent eras. But genetic analysis of ancient chicken bones found on the East African coast tells a different story. Their DNA shows a direct link to poultry breeds from South Asia. These birds did not walk across continents or fly over oceans. They arrived in coops on the decks of vessels sailing the Indian Ocean monsoon routes, likely as a source of fresh food that became a permanent part of new landscapes. An even more prolific traveler was the black rat. The spread of a specific species, Rattus rattus, out of India and into the ports of the Middle East and eventually Europe, maps almost perfectly onto ancient shipping lanes. These rodents are exceptional stowaways, but they cannot swim vast oceans. Their journey required regular, sustained maritime traffic, the kind of reliable shipping schedule that only the predictable monsoon winds could support. Perhaps the most fragrant piece of evidence comes from a royal resting place in Egypt. Inside the nostrils of the mummy of the great pharaoh Ramesses II, scientists found grains of black pepper. This spice is native solely to the Malabar coast of India, thousands of miles away. Its presence in Egypt over 3,000 years ago is a stunning snapshot. It tells us that long before the age of empires we commonly study, a pinch of India could be placed as a final offering for a god-king on the Nile. These biological hitchhikers, from chickens to peppercorns, are the ultimate tangible proof. They could not have traveled such distances by accident or on a single, storm-tossed raft. Their presence requires a highway, a consistent vector of human movement. They are the living, breathing, and breeding signature of the monsoon trade, a trail of crumbs left by history's quietest passengers, confirming a connected world in motion centuries before our history books said it was possible. The proof of this connected world echoes in poetry. In the vibrant courts of ancient South India, between 300 years before the Common Era and 300 years after, poets of the Sangam era wove verses that capture the very heartbeat of the monsoon trade. These are not dry economic records, they are living scenes painted with words, describing a world already in full, glorious motion. They sing of a legendary port called Muziris, a place where the river meets the sea. In these poems, we hear the shouts of dockworkers and the clamor of the market. We see the large, elegant ships of the Yavanas, a Tamil word for Greeks and later Romans, arriving with the predictable southwest monsoon. Their hulls are heavy with gold coins and jars of wine, treasures from the distant Mediterranean. And what do they seek in return? The black gold of the Malabar coast, pepper, along with bales of fine cotton cloth, brilliant pearls, and gleaming ivory. When the wind shifts, these same ships, now laden with the scents and riches of India, catch the northeast monsoon and vanish over the horizon, their departure timed perfectly with the turning of the season. This is the schedule of a mature economy, not an experimental venture. The Tamil kingdoms behind this trade, the Cheras, Cholas, and Pandyas, were not passive recipients of foreign goods. They were sophisticated, active powers. Their lands produced the very commodities that fueled the desires of empires to the west. Their ports were cosmopolitan hubs where local merchants haggled with foreigners in a babel of languages, where warehouses stood full of goods awaiting the next wind. The Sangam literature does more than describe trade, it proves a profound shift in our understanding. By this era, the system was not beginning, it was already perfected. South India was not a distant, mythical land at the edge of the map. It was a central economic powerhouse, fully integrated into a web that stretched from the Roman forums to the South China Sea. The monsoon winds did not just blow ships to these shores, they blew them into the very center of the ancient world story. The rhythm of the monsoon was an open secret, whispered among sailors for centuries. Then came a new power with a hunger for precision and a passion for writing everything down. In the wake of Alexander the Great's campaigns, which pushed Greek knowledge to the very edges of the known world, his successors in Egypt, the Ptolemaic dynasty, gazed south with a merchant's calculating eye. They controlled the fertile Nile, but the real wealth seemed to lie beyond the Red Sea, in the spice ports of Arabia and the distant coast of India. They were determined to cut out the middlemen and go straight to the source. This ambition produced one of history's most remarkable documents, a practical guidebook for merchants written in Greek during the 1st century of the Common Era, the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea. It is not a grand epic or a philosophical treatise, it is a captain's log transformed into a commercial manual. It lists ports, cargoes, and local rulers with brisk efficiency. And within its matter-of-fact entries lies the crucial revelation. It instructs a merchant precisely when to sail from Egypt to catch the wind for India. They set sail in July, it states, and arrive in about 40 days at the first market town of India. The text gives a name to this powerful, scheduled wind, calling it Hippalus. For generations, scholars believed Hippalus was a bold Greek navigator who discovered the monsoon, but the truth is more fascinating. Hippalus was not a man, he was the wind itself. The Greek author was simply recording the local name for the southwest monsoon, likely learned from Arab or Indian sailors in the ports of the Red Sea. This was not a discovery in the sense of finding something unknown. It was an act of translation and formalization. The Greeks, with their tradition of geographical science and their desire for systematic knowledge, took the ancient oral wisdom of the Indian Ocean and wrote it down in a language that could be widely circulated across the Mediterranean world. They mapped the schedule. This formal recording was a pivotal moment. It demystified the process, turning a specialized art passed from master to apprentice into a replicable set of instructions. A Roman merchant in Alexandria could now read the Periplus, finance a ship, and with a competent captain, attempt the journey himself, relying on the written guarantee of the wind's timing. The Greek synthesis did not create the monsoon network, but it did something equally transformative. It systematized it for a vast new audience. This opened the floodgates. The meticulous notes of the Periplus provided the blueprint for the staggering explosion of trade that would follow under the Roman Empire, building directly upon the ancient, pre-existing highway that had been operating in rhythm with the sky for over 1,000 years. The story of Hippalus is a tale of empire rewriting a map. Roman writers like Pliny the Elder recorded a version of events that fit their worldview, one of heroic Greek ingenuity. In their telling, a clever navigator named Hippalus observed the seasonal winds of the Indian Ocean and had a brilliant, singular insight. He realized these winds could be harnessed for direct ocean crossings, and in doing so, he supposedly unlocked the sea route to India for the Mediterranean world. It is a compelling story of individual genius, a lone pioneer cracking nature's code. But when placed against the backdrop of everything we have explored, this narrative begins to unravel. How could a vast, intricate, and staggeringly profitable trading network, one that moved spices, gems, and metals between continents, have operated for over 1,000 years if its fundamental engine was a secret waiting to be discovered by a single outsider? The economic logic collapses. Ports like Lothal and Muziris were not built on hope or accident, they were built on schedule. The Tamil poets were not singing of a new discovery, they were describing a routine commercial reality. The answer lies not in the myth of discovery, but in the history of documentation. Hippalus, if he was a real person at all, was far more likely a translator than a trailblazer. He was a Greek sailor or merchant operating in the Red Sea or Arabian Sea who did something profoundly important. He listened. He listened to the Arab and Indian captains in the harbors, the men whose fathers and grandfathers had timed their lives by the monsoon's turn. He learned their names for the winds, their seasonal calendars, their sailing directions, and then he or someone like him brought that knowledge back and formalized it, writing it down in Greek for a new audience. The term Hippalus wind entered the Greco-Roman geographical vocabulary not as a new finding but as a borrowed term. This was the moment of transmission, the point at which a deep, indigenous, and orally preserved science of the ocean was codified into a manual that the expanding Roman commercial machine could use. It represents not the birth of monsoon sailing, but its bureaucratization. The heroic individual narrative serves a purpose. It simplifies a complex history of cross-cultural exchange into a digestible story of Western achievement. But the truth is far richer. It is a story of knowledge patiently accumulated over generations by countless unnamed mariners, a shared secret of the sea that was finally overheard, written down, and presented to the world as a revelation. The monsoon was never lost. It was simply waiting for someone from the outside to finally read the sky's ancient, open schedule. Far to the south, where the Red Sea narrows and the air grows thick with the scent of strange spices, lay a land of legend. For the pharaohs of Egypt, no destination held more mystery or allure than the Kingdom of Punt. It was a place spoken of in whispers, a source of treasures so exotic they seemed to come from a dream. Temple reliefs from Deir el-Bahri, carved around 3,500 years ago, tell the story of a magnificent seafaring expedition sent by Queen Hatshepsut. They show tall, graceful ships being loaded with heaps of aromatic resin, logs of dark ebony wood, sacks of precious incense, and even live animals like baboons and leopards for the royal zoo. This was not a land reachable by desert caravan. The reliefs clearly depict a maritime journey. The exact location of Punt is still debated, with scholars pointing to the coast of modern-day Somalia, Eritrea, or southern Arabia. But the message of the carvings is unambiguous. By the height of the Bronze Age, Egyptian sailors were making deliberate, long-distance voyages down the Red Sea and along the African coast, navigating treacherous reefs and open water to reach a trading partner of immense prestige. They were tapping into a coastal network that already existed. The monsoon system played a role here too, its seasonal winds influencing the Red Sea's currents and making southward journeys in certain seasons far more practical. This African connection was not a one-off adventure. Centuries later, the power dynamic shifted inland to the highlands of Ethiopia and Eritrea, where the Kingdom of Axum rose to prominence. Sitting atop a plateau with access to both the Nile Valley and the Red Sea, Axum became a colossal hub. Its merchants controlled the flow of two of the ancient world's most coveted commodities, African ivory and gold. They built a powerful fleet and a port at Adulis, where goods from the African interior were loaded onto ships. From there, Aksumite traders sailed into the heart of the monsoon network, exchanging their ivory and gold for spices from India, silks from the East, and manufactured goods from the Roman world. They became essential middlemen, an African superpower fully integrated into the oceanic system. The enduring legacy of Punt and the rise of Aksum reveal a critical truth. This was never a simple two-way street between India and the Mediterranean. It was a vibrant, multilateral web. African ivory could end up on a throne in India, Indian cotton could clothe an Aksumite noble, and Roman glass could be found in an African tomb. The monsoon winds did not favor one civilization over another. They enabled a grand, rotating exchange where every coast had something to offer, and every kingdom could find its place in the rhythm of the sky. Open a merchant's logbook from 2,000 years ago, and you would find a list that reads like a map of the world itself. The holds of these monsoon-driven ships were floating treasure chests, each item a condensed story of distant lands and human desire. From the lush, wet slopes of India's Malabar coast came the true king of spices, Piper nigrum, the black peppercorn. Romans called it black gold, and they consumed it with a passion that seems almost bewildering today, using it not just to flavor food, but as a preservative, a medicine, and even a form of currency. A single sailing season could see over 120 ships depart from Egyptian ports, their primary mission to fill their bellies with this pungent cargo. But the wealth of India did not stop there. Its rivers yielded diamonds and sapphires, its forests provided immense, strong teak logs perfect for shipbuilding, and its craftsmen wove cotton cloth of a fineness and lightness unimaginable to those who wore only wool or linen. From the island of Sri Lanka, acting as a great transshipment hub, came cinnamon and other rare aromatics, completing a sensory bounty from the east. The return voyage carried a different kind of wealth. From the Greco-Roman world came the heavy, tangible weight of empire, gold and silver coinage mined from Iberia and Anatolia, used to pay for everything else. There were amphorae brimming with wine from Italy and olive oil from Greece, staples of Mediterranean life that became luxuries abroad. Perhaps most astonishing to recipients were the products of Roman industry, like the brilliant, thin-walled glassware from workshops in Alexandria and Syria, a technological marvel that could mimic precious stone. From the mines of Cyprus and Spain came raw copper and tin, the very ingredients of the Bronze Age, still in demand centuries later. This was a balanced exchange, raw material and crafted goods flowing east, while organic and mineral wealth flowed west. Other coasts added their unique signatures to this global manifest. The African interior, accessed through ports like Adulis, supplied the most sought-after ivory, along with gold dust, tortoiseshell for ornate inlay work, and even live animals like cheetahs or parrots for the private zoos of foreign elites. The arid highlands of southern Arabia contributed their sacred resins, frankincense, and myrrh, without which no temple or royal ceremony in the ancient world was complete. This was far more than a simple luxury trade. It was an exchange of entire ecosystems and the specialized knowledge to harvest their secrets. Pepper changed how food was preserved and experienced. Incense transformed spiritual practice. Indian cotton offered a new standard of comfort for clothing, while Roman glass introduced a new art form. Each commodity on that manifest represents a node in a vast, interdependent web. A diamond mined in India might be set in a ring in Rome, purchased with silver from Spain, transported on a ship built with teak from India, powered by a wind understood by Arab sailors, and ensured by the predictable schedule they all shared. The monsoon did not just carry spices and silk, it carried the very building blocks of civilization, connecting the specialized labor of one continent to the aspirations of another, weaving a single, intricate economy from the threads of the world. But the greatest treasures carried on those ships were weightless. beyond the peppercorns and pearls, the monsoon winds transported something far more enduring, the invisible cargo of ideas. A merchant ship was a floating university, its hold packed not just with goods but with the beliefs, stories, and innovations of entire cultures. As sailors and traders shared meals in foreign ports, they exchanged more than currency, they shared visions of the universe itself. Cosmological ideas traveled with the stars they used for navigation. Artistic styles were copied from a beautiful textile or a piece of jewelry, and technological concepts, like new shipbuilding techniques or metallurgical secrets, were quietly observed and adopted. This cultural diffusion was the monsoon network's deepest and most lasting legacy. Look at the serene face of a Buddha statue carved in ancient Sri Lanka or Cambodia. The artistic language, the graceful curl of the robe, the meditative posture, often bears the distinct influence of Indian sculptural traditions. These styles did not walk over the Himalayas, they sailed. Buddhist monks seeking to spread the teachings frequently traveled as passengers on the very merchant ships that plied these familiar routes. The monasteries that grew up in port cities became hubs of learning and exchange, where spiritual ideas moved as freely as spices. The same ships that carried black pepper westward also carried, over centuries, a revolutionary mathematical concept, the idea of zero, and the Indian numeral system that we use today. This was a silent, profound transfer of intellectual software that would eventually reshape science and commerce across the globe. The flow was never one way. In the northwest of the Indian subcontinent, in the region of Gandhara, a fascinating fusion occurred. After the campaigns of Alexander the Great, Greek artistic influences lingered. Local artisans, trained in Buddhist iconography, began to sculpt the Buddha with the realistic drapery and idealized human form of classical Greek statues, creating a unique and powerful artistic synthesis. Even the humble coin tells a story of this exchange. Roman denarii, arriving in South India by the sackful, were so trusted that local kingdoms sometimes issued their own coins, copying the image of the Roman emperor, not out of political allegiance, but as a universal stamp of reliability and value in a connected marketplace. This was the true nature of the monsoon world, a shared cosmopolitan sphere. A trader in a port like Muziris might start his day with a ritual from his Indian homeland, conduct business using Greek accounting methods, pay for goods with coins bearing a Roman emperor's face, and listen in the evening to a Buddhist monk from Sri Lanka speak of compassion. The commercial network created a space where beliefs could mingle and merge without conquest. The ocean was not a barrier separating distinct civilizations. It was a connective tissue fostering a dialogue that shaped art, science, and spirit across half the world. Gold and pepper were weighed in the shadow of houses built for foreigners. The port cities of the monsoon network were not passive waypoints. They were the beating hearts of the entire system, living engines of cosmopolitan exchange. Step onto the crowded wharves of Muziris, a name that echoed from Tamil poetry to Roman ledgers. The air is thick with a dozen languages, the shouts of stevedores mixing with the haggling of merchants over bales of cotton and amphorae of wine. This is not a colonial outpost or a military garrison. It is a neutral zone of commerce, a deliberately constructed space where the world could meet to trade. Archaeological excavations at Pattanam in Kerala, a strong candidate for ancient Muziris, reveal this layered reality in the soil. Digging down, archaeologists find fragments of fine Roman terra sigillata pottery alongside Yemeni incense burners and vibrant glass beads from West Asia, all resting next to local Tamil ceramics and remnants of massive black pepper processing. This was a true melting pot where goods from across the ocean became part of the local trash heap, a sure sign of daily, intimate coexistence. These ports were meticulously organized to facilitate this global conversation. They featured massive brick warehouses for storage, administrative buildings for customs officials to assess duties, and dedicated residential quarters where foreign merchants could live for months at a time. This last point is crucial. The monsoon's predictable schedule meant a Greek or Arab trader arriving in July knew he was effectively stranded until the winds shifted in his favor around November or December. He could not simply trade and leave, he had to settle in. This enforced residence transformed brief encounters into sustained relationships. A Yavana or Greek merchant would rent a house, hire local servants, learn fragments of the Tamil language, and navigate a hybrid legal system that blended local customs with the practical needs of international trade. Disputes were likely settled by a council of elders representing both the local community and the merchant guilds. In these spaces, different religions encountered one another not through doctrine but through daily life. A Roman might make an offering to Mercury, god of commerce, while his Tamil business partner honored local deities, and a Jewish trader observed the Sabbath, all within earshot of one another. This created the first true diaspora communities of the ancient world. Over time, these seasonal residents put down deeper roots. They married locally, raised families, and acted as permanent bridges between their homeland and their adopted port. Their homes, as one Tamil poem beautifully notes, were cool and beautiful permanent structures that changed the skyline. They became cultural translators, ensuring that the next season's ships were greeted by familiar faces and understood expectations. The port city, therefore, was a social invention as profound as the stitched ship or the stellar compass. It was a pragmatic solution to a geographical fact, the monsoon's long pause. By creating these neutral, organized hubs, the ancient world solved the problem of cross-cultural trust. The reliability of the wind fostered the reliability of human connection, turning strangers into partners and foreign shores into second homes. In these noisy, fragrant, crowded ports, globalization found its first true address. Yet this grand exchange required a central pivot, a place where all routes converged. That place was an emerald island suspended in the Erythraean Sea, known to the Greeks as Taprobane and to us as Sri Lanka. More than just a stopover, Sri Lanka was the indispensable hub of the entire Indian Ocean world, a geographical keystone. Its position was perfect, a large, fertile island sitting directly astride the main sea lanes. For a ship from the Roman world, exhausted after a month or more riding the relentless southwest monsoon, the sight of its lush green mountains was a promise of respite. It was here they would make landfall, repair their vessels, take on fresh water and food, and prepare for the next leg of their journey. Sri Lanka was the ultimate refueling station, a natural entrepôt where goods from every direction were gathered, sorted, and transshipped. But it was far more than a passive warehouse. The island itself was a treasure chest. Its rivers yielded sapphires and rubies of legendary quality. Its coastal waters produced luminous pearls, and its forests were the source of true cinnamon, a spice even more prized than kasha. This meant Sri Lankan merchants traded their own riches while expertly managing the flow of others, becoming master facilitators of global commerce. From this bustling hub, the monsoon highway stretched further east into the vast embrace of the Bay of Bengal. This was the eastern wing of the system, a network just as vital as the Arabian Sea route. The same predictable wind patterns that powered trade to the west also enabled journeys across the bay. A ship leaving the east coast of India or Sri Lanka could catch the southwest monsoon to sail northeast toward the rich river deltas of the Ganges and the Irrawaddy. After trading, the reversing northeast monsoon would carry it home. This rhythm connected Sri Lanka directly to the emerging kingdoms of Southeast Asia. One of the first great beneficiaries was the maritime state of Funan, located in the Mekong Delta of present-day Vietnam and Cambodia. Funan's prosperity was built entirely on its position as a funnel. It collected spices, aromatic woods, and gold from the Indonesian archipelago and the Malay Peninsula, then passed them west to the Indian and Sri Lankan traders arriving on the monsoon winds. In return, it received Indian cotton, Roman glass, and new ideas. This Bay of Bengal network was the primary conduit for one of history's most profound cultural exchanges. It was not an invasion, but a gentle, persistent diffusion. Indian concepts of kingship, Hindu and Buddhist religious thought, architectural styles, and the Sanskrit script all flowed eastward along these monsoon routes, carried by traders and traveling priests who were regular passengers on the merchant ships. The nascent kingdoms of Burma, Thailand, Cambodia, and Indonesia did not simply copy these ideas. They adapted them, blending them with deep local traditions to create something entirely new and magnificent. The future temples of Angkor and Borobudur were seeded on these voyages. Sri Lanka, therefore, was not just a commercial pivot, it was a cultural and technological bridge. Its central role ensured that the monsoon system was never a closed loop between India and the West, but an open, dynamic web that spun new connections further east with every turning of the seasonal wind. The island stood at the very heart of the ancient world, proof that in a network of such scale, the greatest power could lie in connection, not conquest. A sack of Roman silver coins buried for safekeeping, never recovered. Hoards like this, unearthed across southern India, are not merely treasure, they are economic seismographs recording a shockwave of demand that reverberated across the ancient world. With the rise of the Roman Empire, a new and voracious consumer entered the monsoon marketplace. The pivotal moment came around 30 years before the Common Era, when Augustus annexed Egypt. Rome now controlled the gateway to the Red Sea and, by extension, the entire maritime pipeline to the east. The Roman elite developed an insatiable appetite for Eastern luxuries, pepper for their feasts, silk for their robes, pearls for their adornment, and gems for their display. This was not a gradual increase, it was a frenzy. Roman merchants, armed with the sailing schedules formalized in the Periplus, now operated on an industrial scale. They bypassed countless middlemen, establishing their own fortified ports on the Egyptian coast of the Red Sea, like Berenice and Myos Hormuz. From these hubs, they dispatched enormous vessels, some capable of carrying hundreds of tons of cargo, on a direct ocean crossing to the Malabar coast. The scale is almost difficult to comprehend. One first-century writer, the Roman historian Pliny the Elder, lamented the trade imbalance, estimating that India, China, and Arabia drained at least 100 million sesterces from the empire every year, a staggering sum equivalent to the annual pay of an entire Roman legion. This river of silver and gold denarii flowed east, paying for the spices and silks that filled the warehouses of Rome. But to call this Roman invention would be a profound misunderstanding. They did not create the monsoon highway, they plugged into it. The wind patterns were millennia old. The navigation techniques were honed by generations of Arab and Indian sailors. The ports of Muziris and others were already thriving cosmopolitan hubs. The Romans were the new, immensely wealthy customers who arrived at a very old, very sophisticated bazaar and placed the largest order in history. Their demand acted like a supercharger on an already humming engine. They increased the volume, the frequency, and the sheer monetary weight of the exchange, but they did not rewrite the rules. They used the existing schedule, relied on local pilots and merchants, and ultimately depended on the ancient rhythm of the winds that had dictated trade long before Romulus founded his city. This was a story of integration and disruption, not creation. The monsoon network absorbed the colossal force of Roman demand, bending but not breaking, proving its fundamental resilience. The real story lies in how this ancient system adapted to accommodate an empire, and what happened when that empire's golden river of coins finally began to run dry. That river of silver flowing east was not just a trade, it was a seismic economic event. Pliny the Elder, watching from Rome, saw a troubling imbalance. He calculated that India, China, and Arabia drained over 100 million sesterces from the empire every single year, a fortune literally sailing away to pay for pepper, silk, and pearls. For the Roman state, this was a persistent worry, a hemorrhage of precious metal needed to pay soldiers and fund public works. But from a wider perspective, this so-called bullion drain is our clearest evidence of the trade's staggering scale. It proves that the appetite for Eastern luxuries was not a minor indulgence, but a central pillar of Roman elite consumption, powerful enough to redirect the wealth of an empire. Yet every coin that left Rome did not vanish, it was transformed. On the sun-drenched docks of Muziris and other South Indian ports, that Roman silver and gold was not an endpoint, it was a new beginning. This massive influx of precious metal flooded into local economies, acting as a powerful stimulant. Kings used it to raise magnificent temples that still stand today, their stone carvings funded by distant Roman appetites. Merchant guilds, grown wealthy and influential from managing the trade, gained unprecedented social and political power, sometimes rivaling that of the nobility. The entire region was uplifted by this consistent, wind-driven delivery of Mediterranean wealth. This created something revolutionary, a genuinely globalized market for the very first time. A political crisis in Rome, a bad harvest in Italy, or a shift in imperial fashion could now ripple across the world, carried on the same winds that brought the ships. A drop in demand for pepper in the forums of Rome could mean falling prices and hardship for a farming family on the Malabar coast months later. Conversely, a monsoon failure in India could send spice prices soaring in Alexandria, affecting every cook and merchant in the city. The fates of a legionary in Gaul and a pepper farmer in Kerala were now, subtly but surely, intertwined. This interdependence, woven by the predictable monsoon winds, marks a profound turning point. It shows us that ancient economies were not isolated bubbles, but dynamic parts of a connected hemispheric system, where the breath of the sky could link the prosperity of continents. The monsoon winds did not stop at the coast of India. Their power reached further across the vast Bay of Bengal to a world of tangled mangrove forests and mighty rivers. Here in the fertile Mekong Delta, a civilization rose from the water, its wealth written not in stone monuments at first, but in the mud of its harbors. This was the Kingdom of Funan, flourishing from the 1st to the 6th century of the Common Era. Chinese diplomats who visited wrote of walled cities, extensive canals, and a people who used silver and gold in their transactions. But the true source of Funan's power was its location. It was the ultimate maritime crossroads, the critical link where two great trading worlds met. From the west, riding the predictable monsoon, came the large, ocean-going vessels of the Indian and Roman traders, laden with cotton, glass, and religious ideas. From the east and south, using the complex archipelago waterways, came smaller ships carrying the unique treasures of Southeast Asia, aromatic woods like sandalwood, rare spices such as cloves and nutmeg from distant islands, gold from inland mines, and the fragrant resins known as benzoin. Funan sat in the middle, masterfully controlling the transfer. Its great port city, known today as Archaeology, was a marvel of ancient logistics. Archaeologists digging through its waterlogged soil have pulled up a stunning collection of global artifacts. They found a gold medallion bearing the image of the Roman Emperor Antoninus Pius, alongside carved gemstones from Persia, intricate seals from India, and delicate bronze mirrors from Han Dynasty China. This was not a city on the periphery of the world. It was a central warehouse for the planet's luxuries. The rulers of Funan were geniuses of what we might call port politics. They did not necessarily produce vast quantities of goods themselves. Instead, they created the conditions for wealth to flow through their territory. They built and maintained the port facilities, dredged canals to connect river systems to the sea, and provided security for merchants. In return, they exacted tariffs and taxes on every transaction, growing immensely rich from the sheer volume of trade. Their understanding of the monsoon was administrative. They knew the schedules intimately, planning for the arrival of the large Indian Ocean ships with the southwest wind, and coordinating the departure of their own smaller, shallow draft vessels to distribute goods along the coast and up the rivers of Southeast Asia. Funan is a perfect example of the monsoon system's expansive power. It shows how this dependable wind pattern acted as a catalyst for civilization far from its original core. The predictable rhythm of trade did not just bring goods, it brought the foundations of complex society, centralized authority, and cosmopolitan culture to new shores. A kingdom could be born not from conquering vast lands, but from mastering the space between tides where the world's wealth changed hands. The fall of Rome did not silence the monsoon winds. While the great Western market for pepper and silk contracted, the rhythm of the ocean's breath continued, and with it, the life of the trade network. The system did not collapse, it transformed, proving its resilience was woven not from imperial demand, but from the very fabric of nature and human enterprise. New powers, watching the ebb of Roman influence, stepped forward to harness the ancient sky highway. First came the Sasanian Persians, inheritors of a long maritime tradition in the Persian Gulf. They expanded their naval reach, fostering ports and protecting merchant fleets that now carried goods east and west without the overwhelming shadow of Rome. But the next shift was truly monumental. The rapid expansion of the Islamic caliphates in the 7th and 8th centuries created something unprecedented. A single, vast economic sphere that stretched from the shores of Spain and North Africa, across the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf, all the way to the western coast of India. For the first time, the entire western half of the monsoon network was united under a common political authority, a shared language of commerce, and a currency that was trusted from Cordoba to Cambay. This was not a disruption, it was a consolidation. The monsoon winds did not change their schedule, but the ships that rode them now often flew different flags and answered to new caliphs in Damascus or Baghdad. The trade routes adapted with a fluid grace. With the center of gravity shifting eastward, new ports rose to dazzling prominence. Look at Suraf on the Persian coast. Once a modest fishing village, it exploded into a wealthy, cosmopolitan emporium under the Abbasid Caliphate. Its merchants financed voyages directly to India and China. Its warehouses held the treasures of 3 continents, and its shipbuilders were renowned for crafting some of the finest vessels on the water. The volume and variety of trade did not diminish, they diversified and expanded. The goods changed slightly, with new demands for Islamic glazed pottery, specific textiles, and scholarly texts joining the flow of traditional spices and gems. What does this profound continuity tell us? The monsoon system was resilient because it was fundamentally decentralized. It was not a Roman road, built and maintained by a single state, liable to fall into disrepair when that state faltered. It was more like the wind itself, a natural force that could be harnessed by anyone with the knowledge and the courage. Its true architects were not emperors, but the countless generations of merchants, sailors, and port officials who maintained the networks, shared the sailing law, and fostered the relationships that transcended political borders. When one patron faded, another simply stepped into the rhythm. The system's strength lay in its adaptability, in its foundation upon an immutable natural clock, and the enduring human desire to connect and exchange. The post-Roman era was not an ending, but a vivid demonstration of the monsoon world's deepest truth. Empires rise and fall, but the wind and the will to sail it are forever. The ocean floor holds the final, unedited logbook of this ancient trade. While the monsoon winds have long since faded from a ship's sail, its cargo often rests in the silent dark, waiting to be read. Underwater archaeology offers our most direct encounter with these vanished voyages, a chance to touch the very timbers and treasures that rode the seasonal sky. The challenge, however, is immense. The warm, tropical waters of the open Indian Ocean are home to Teredo navalis, the shipworm, a creature that devours wooden hulls with ruthless efficiency. Combined with deep ocean trenches, this means a perfectly preserved pre-Roman vessel from the high seas may never be found. Yet the story is not lost, it has simply settled in more protected graves. In the shallow, calmer waters off the southern coast of Sri Lanka, near Godavaya, archaeologists discovered a shipwreck from around the 1st century before the Common Era. This was no ordinary find. Its hull had largely vanished, consumed by time and life, but its stone anchors and, crucially, its cargo remained. The hold was filled with a shipment of raw material, iron ingots and unique cone-shaped glass ingots, likely meant for local workshops. This wreck is a frozen ledger entry. It confirms not just the movement of goods, but the industrial nature of the trade, showing that raw materials for manufacturing were flowing across the Bay of Bengal on scheduled monsoon runs. The ship was not carrying finished statues or coins for kings, but the very stuff of everyday economic life, proving the network's depth and sophistication. Beyond singular wrecks, the coastline itself is an archive. Along the Tamil coast of India, geological studies reveal a landscape in slow motion. Sea levels have risen since antiquity, swallowing the outer edges of ancient ports whole. What were once bustling stone quays and warehouses now lie beneath fishing waters, buried under layers of sand and silt. Here, archaeologists use tools like core sampling, extracting long cylinders of seabed sediment, and side-scan sonar, which paints an acoustic picture of the submerged landscape. These techniques can map the ghostly outlines of ancient breakwaters, jetties, and docking basins, revealing the ambitious scale of harbor engineering. By dating layers of sediment, they can identify periods of intense dredging activity, moments when a port was expanded to handle more traffic, directly correlating with historical peaks in monsoon trade. Each sand grain disturbed by a sonar pulse, each pottery shard pulled from a core sample, is a data point in a vast, submerged spreadsheet. This silent witness from the seabed does more than confirm written accounts. It adds crucial details the texts omit. It tells us about the weight and shape of ingots, the design of anchors, the layout of harbors designed to shelter ships awaiting the wind's turn. Every artifact recovered is a moment captured, a single frame from a continuous film of exchange that played for centuries upon the monsoon stage. The steady rhythm of the monsoon created a world apart. To grasp its true innovation, we must contrast it with the sea that shaped Western antiquity, the Mediterranean. Here, the winds are famously fickle, shifting without pattern, offering no grand seasonal reversal to set a calendar by. A calm could strand a vessel for days, only to be shattered by a sudden, violent squall. This unpredictable environment forged a specific kind of seamanship. Phoenician and Greek sailors became masters of coastal hopping, rarely venturing far from the sight of land. Their iconic vessels, the biremes and triremes, were built for this reality, powered as much by banks of oars as by their single square sails, allowing them to maneuver when the wind failed or turned against them. Every voyage was a negotiation with chaos, a slow, cautious crawl from headland to headland. The monsoon system enabled the opposite. It offered predictability. It replaced guesswork with a schedule, transforming the open ocean from a terrifying void into a calculated corridor. Where Mediterranean ships were designed for versatility and combat, evolving into instruments of naval warfare, Indian Ocean vessels were engineered for endurance and cargo capacity. Their stitched, flexible hulls were built to ride the monsoon's powerful, consistent swell, not to ram an enemy. This fundamental environmental difference bred entirely different maritime cultures. The Mediterranean, with its countless islands and coves, fostered a world of competitive city-states, naval battles, and settler colonies planted on foreign shores. The Indian Ocean, governed by its reliable breath, cultivated something else, a network of interconnected cosmopolitan port cities. Here, the goal was not to claim territory, but to facilitate exchange. The monsoon made long-distance, bulk trade in luxuries not just possible, but efficient. A merchant could plan a voyage of thousands of miles with a degree of confidence impossible in the ancient Mediterranean. This comparison is not about declaring one system superior, but about understanding profound adaptation. It reveals how the monsoon environment sculpted a unique commercial civilization, one that achieved a peaceful, continental-scale integration centuries before similar concepts took hold elsewhere. The wind did not just fill the sails, it shaped the very philosophy of connection. This environmental legacy runs deeper than any single trade route. The monsoon was more than a convenience, it was the ultimate architect of time itself for half the world. Its predictable rhythm became the metronome against which empires set their tempo. A king planning a military campaign had to consider the monsoon season, for moving armies along coastal routes or across the sea was impossible against its might. The fiscal year of a merchant kingdom began and ended with the wind's turn, its treasuries swelling or contracting based on the success of the last sailing season. In the agrarian heartlands, the arrival of the life-giving rains dictated the planting and harvest cycles, making the monsoon a direct arbiter of feast or famine, stability or revolt. Entire religious calendars and major festivals, from the subcontinent to Southeast Asia, were and still are meticulously aligned with this atmospheric heartbeat, tying the sacred directly to the seasonal. This was environmental determinism in its most elegant form, not a harsh constraint, but a predictable pattern that human ingenuity learned to orchestrate itself around. The kingdoms that thrived were not necessarily those with the largest armies, but those who mastered the logistics of this schedule. Controlling a key port like Muziris or a source region like the Malabar coast was akin to holding a valve on a pipeline of global wealth. The wind itself created a formidable natural barrier to entry. You could not simply decide to be an Indian Ocean trader. You needed generations of accumulated knowledge, the right ships built with specific materials, and most importantly, the patience to wait. This enforced waiting period, sometimes months long in foreign ports, fostered something remarkable, a practical culture of tolerance. When you are a merchant from Rome or Arabia living in a Tamil port for half the year, you cannot afford constant conflict. You must learn local customs, negotiate fairly, and build trust. This necessity became the mother of cosmopolitanism. Shared knowledge transcended ethnic and linguistic lines because the sea and the sky were the ultimate teachers, indifferent to the origin of the sailor. The monsoon system, therefore, stands as one of history's greatest examples of climate as infrastructure. We are accustomed to thinking of infrastructure as something built, like a road, a bridge, or a canal. But here, the infrastructure was provided by the planet itself, a vast, reliable, and free atmospheric engine. It shaped human history as decisively as the Nile's floods or the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, but on a hemispheric scale. It did not just connect places, it created a unique historical space, a maritime world built on anticipation, cooperation, and a shared respect for a force greater than any king. The legacy of the monsoon is not merely in the spices that changed cuisines or the silks that adorned elites, but in the very model of a connected world it pioneered, a world where difference was not a barrier to commerce, but its essential ingredient. So where does this leave our understanding of globalization? That word, so often tied to container ships and the internet, begins to feel strangely small. The monsoon network reveals a world already woven together long before the term was ever coined. Think of a citizen in imperial Rome 2,000 years ago. He might wake on a bed with cotton sheets from India, sprinkle Indonesian pepper on his eggs, and burn Arabian frankincense in a ceremony, using a silver coin that could, within a year, be offered at a temple thousands of miles away on the Malabar coast. This was not a series of rare, exotic accidents. It was the daily texture of life made possible by a system of breathtaking regularity. The ancient world was not a collection of lonely lanterns shining in isolated darkness. It was a vast, shimmering web, each strand vibrating with the passage of goods, people, and ideas. To see it otherwise is to misunderstand history itself. This realization demands a quiet but profound shift in our perspective. For too long, the story of global connection was told as a series of European discoveries, a narrative that begins with Vasco da Gama rounding the Cape of Good Hope in the late 15th century. But when his ships finally reached the Indian Ocean, they did not find an empty sea or primitive ports. They sailed into a mature, sophisticated, and bustling commercial world that had been operating on its own intricate schedules for millennia. The monsoon system forces us to recenter the story. It places the ingenuity and agency of African, Arabian, and Asian civilizations right at the heart of the narrative. The kingdoms of Aksum and Sabah, the merchants of Gujarat and Tamilakam, the shipbuilders of Oman, these were not passive recipients of progress from elsewhere. They were the architects, the navigators, and the engineers of the first global economy. Their knowledge of the stars, their mastery of ship construction, and their complex commercial laws created the framework that later empires merely plugged into. This is not about diminishing any one civilization, but about expanding our appreciation for a truly collaborative human achievement. It reveals a fundamental truth: the drive to reach out, to trade, to learn from strangers, and to find wonder in the distant is not a modern invention. It is a deep and enduring human trait. What the monsoon winds provided was something extraordinary, a natural ally in that endeavor. They offered a predictable rhythm in a chaotic world, a celestial agreement that if you understood the sky, you could trust the sea. That trust built more than wealth. It built a model of the world where connection was the default and where the breath of the planet itself guided the way. That ancient web of wind and water leaves us with a quiet revelation. We have sailed across millennia, tracing the path of mariners who listened to the sky's schedule and turned a planetary breath into a bridge between continents. From the brick-lined docks of the Indus Valley to the bustling ports of southern India, from the incense trails of Arabia to the river kingdoms of Southeast Asia, we witnessed a profound truth. A natural climate pattern, the monsoon's reliable rhythm, did not just enable trade, it fostered one of history's first and most resilient global networks. This system thrived for centuries not through conquest but through connection, built on a shared understanding of the world's deepest cycles. Its legacy is measured in more than pepper and pearls. It is found in the silent exchange of ideas that traveled as stowaways on every ship, in the artistic styles that blended across oceans, and in the very words for spices that entered new languages. This story of the pre-Roman monsoon trading system is a testament to a specific kind of human genius, the ingenuity of observation and adaptation. It shows us that progress is not always about forcing nature to submit, but sometimes about learning to dance in step with its grand, predictable patterns. This journey reshapes our map of the past, revealing an ancient world shimmering with connections, far more dynamic and intertwined than our traditional narratives often allow. It was a world where a farmer in Kerala, a sailor in Oman, and a merchant in Alexandria were all linked by an invisible thread of wind. If this voyage into historical mystery resonated with you, we would love to hear your reflections. What ancient connection or piece of evidence from this network surprised you the most? Share your thoughts below. And if you are eager for more journeys into the hidden currents of history, consider subscribing to stay with us as we explore further.